I can only depend on myself. Everyone will hurt me. Everyone I love will leave. I have to be perfect in order to be loved. I have to prove my worth. I must perform and or achieve certain things before I can be loved and accepted. All of these are false core beliefs that many people don't even realize that they are operating out of. And so it's important for us to see how these play out in our life. For example, people-pleasing comes from the idea that if someone is disappointed in you, if you disappoint others, if you say no to others, if others are angry with you, you won't be safe. And that's because that was the case in childhood. But what we have to learn to heal that is that as adults, we have to realize that we are safe. And even if someone is disappointed, you will still be safe. And even if someone is angry with you, you are still safe. This is retraining your nervous system. Literally, to be able to understand that even when someone isn't happy with you, you're still safe. It's the retraining of the nervous system. Someone who has the core belief that unless I perform or achieve certain things, I will not be loved or accepted. How does that show up in adult life? These are the people who might become hyper independent, or rather workaholics. They are become extremely obsessed and focused on proving themselves. That they will become actually, they'll get very addicted to their job, their career, and they lose balance. The core belief is I have to prove my worth because it's not intrinsic. And unless I achieve, unless I make X amount of money, I'm worthless. And so sometimes, and you might wonder, a lot of men fall into this. You might wonder why certain people in your life are so obsessed with their job or workaholics. And deep down, it's actually a lack of intrinsic self-worth. It's a person who maybe growing up, they received conditional love. There's conditional love and there's unconditional love, right? Conditional love was as long as you're getting good grades, as long as you are succeeding in your job, in your school, as long as you're doing as I say, I will show you love. But the moment you fall short, maybe you didn't get a good grade, maybe you aren't performing at the level that I expect, maybe you aren't doing exactly as I say, then I will withhold love. And the withholding of love can be in different forms. It can be punishment. It can be the silent treatment. It can be harshness, shame, etc. So that person is now, how does it play out in adulthood? They are workaholics. They are always trying to prove themselves. You know, oftentimes we describe people as independent. And independence is one thing. But do you know that hyper-independence is actually a trauma response? Hyper-independence. We need to understand that anything that is imbalanced, anything that is at an extreme, comes from something deep down that was missing. anytime you see an extreme, whether someone is extreme in their job, extreme in people pleasing, extreme in proving themselves, extreme in independence, extreme in harshness, you know that at the root there was something that was missing, or something that was too much, or some sort of dysfunction. It is a coping mechanism to try to compensate for something that they needed that they didn't get, or something that they got that was harmful. So when you look at hyper-independence, what's the core belief? The core belief is I can't depend on anyone. People will always let me down. And so what we have to start to do is we have to start to heal the core beliefs. It's interesting because core beliefs are programmed when we are children. And it becomes sometimes like a learned helplessness. So if you look at, for example, the concept of learned helplessness, take the example of the circus. So in the circus, you see elephants, right? Big, giant, mighty elephants who are basically doing as they're told. You might wonder why. Why don't they just break free? They could trample the person holding onto the rope. This is why they don't. It's because the circus takes the elephant when it's a baby and then puts the rope. And so the elephant in its fitra will try to break free. But it tries to break free and it fails. It tries to break free and it fails. It tries to break free and it fails until it learns that it is helpless. And this in psychology is called learned helplessness. It is that the understanding is that I have learned that I don't have the ability to break free. I have learned that I'm helpless. So because it was learned when they actually were helpless, even when they grow up into an adult elephant and they are no longer helpless, but the limiting belief is already learned. So they never try. And this is what happens to us, is that many of us learned helplessness in childhood. We learned that we don't have the power to change our circumstance. We learned that we are powerless because in a lot of cases as children, we are. We are powerless. And especially when we as children are growing up in volatile, unsafe, painful environments, and we have no power to change it. We might learn that we are powerless. And then we internalize that hopelessness and that helplessness so that even when we are no longer actually helpless, but we've learned it. And so the limiting belief is a mental chain. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. Women in abusive relationships, women in toxic homes, women in oppressive situations who really believe that they're helpless. They have learned helplessness, but they are not actually helpless. But it is something that is mental. I can't do anything. I am powerless. I am helpless. I want to tell you that you're not. We are not helpless. We are not powerless. And so healing involves unlearning a lot of the things that we learned that were actually just coping mechanisms, but they are actually now dysfunction. See, they started off as coping mechanisms. They kept you safe, or they allowed you to survive a certain environment. But when you carry it into your current environment, it's dysfunctional. And we have to learn to break that and to heal from what used to be a coping mechanism. What's interesting is that our dysfunction today used to be an old coping mechanism. People pleasing, hyper independence, trust issues, the suppression of emotion, all of these things, they were coping mechanisms, but they need to be unlearned and rewired in order for us to heal. How do we heal? So I'll tell you something really interesting that happens sometimes is that how many of you are overthinkers? I got some overthinkers. Can I tell you something that was like mind-blowing when I read this? You ready for this? Are you sure? Okay. It's going to blow your mind. Like mind-blown emoticon. Overthinking is underfeeling. What does that mean? We overthink to avoid feeling. We try to stay in our heads to stay out of our bodies. And so what happens is it's an overcompensation for someone who doesn't want to get vulnerable. Oldest daughters, dismissive avoidance. The point is, anxious too. It's a way to avoid the uncomfortable feelings. And so one of the ways that we try to avoid vulnerability, feeling, I don't want to feel it. I don't want to feel the disappointment. I don't want to feel the worry. I don't want to feel the fear. I don't want to feel the grief. So what do I do instead? I stay in my head. I overthink. I think and I try to think my way out of the problem. I try to think my way out of it. I replay the conversation. I replay, what could I have done different? What could they have done different? But what if, and all I'm doing is I'm avoiding the feeling. So if you want to stop overthinking, you got to feel the emotion that you're trying to avoid. And what's so interesting about healing and mental health in general is something you might not expect. There was one psychologist, she was asked, like, how do I deal with my anxiety? How do I stop the panic attacks? How do I heal from the trauma? How do I deal with depression? She said, you know what? The answer to all of these questions is essentially the same. You have to feel your pain. See, the thing that we're avoiding is the very solution. And it is actually the path to healing. You can't avoid your way out of pain. You also can't think your way out of pain. You got those people who intellectualize everything. So, for example, they could explain trauma better than the professor. They know all the terminology. They can overdiagnose themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, I know what's going on. I don't need therapy because I know I have this. Right? They can name it till it's blue in the face. They can diagnose everyone else. But this is what's very interesting. Healing does not come from critical thinking. Healing only comes from critical feeling. So you can't intellectualize your way out of pain. You can't intellectualize your way to healing. You have to actually feel. Because ultimately, the wounds that we have, that we carry, they're unresolved emotion, unresolved pain, and unresolved grief. And the only way to resolve it is to digest it, to process it, and that's how you release it. You can't digest it and process it by just thinking it to death. You can't overthink yourself. You can't overthink your way to healing. So when you look at the idea of all types of trauma therapy, whether it is EMDR or somatic healing or inner child work, whatever it is, psychotherapy, it's all basically going in and feeling the thing you were afraid to feel, but this time in a safe place. This time in safety. Because in the past, it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe to feel. It wasn't safe to process. And you didn't have that support. So that's essentially what therapy is that safe place to process the emotion that wasn't processed and to feel it. And that's how you heal it. This is important to note because we have an idea sometimes in our religious rhetoric and in our religious circles that sabr means suppressing emotion. We see this a lot when someone is grieving. We see this when someone is crying. We'll get well-meaning people to come and say, have sabr. As if feeling grief and crying means you don't have sabr. That's false. We have evidence from the Quran and Sunnah that that's false. Yaqub alayhi salam had sabrun jameel. Beautiful patience. And he grieved and he cried until he went blind. We have Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he was holding his dying son in his arms. And he says, when one of the companions came and was taken aback because he started to cry. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is crying like a healthy human being whose child is dying. And one of the companions was taken aback and said, what is this? And the Prophet ﷺ said, it is mercy that Allah puts in the hearts of the believers. And then he says, the eyes shed tears and the heart feels grief, but the tongue does not utter except what is pleasing to Allah. And then he says that he was going to miss his son. See, this is what is called healthy emotional processing. And it is in our sunnah. It is only our culture that came and taught a bunch of toxic stuff and then called it Islam. Such as, stop crying, have sabr. Stop feeling, have sabr. As if sabr means suppress emotion, don't cry. False. And not only is it false, I wish it was just false, it is toxic, it is harmful. Because guess what? Allah created tears as a way to release pain. Do you know the studies, and I encourage you to read these studies about tears and what they do for the nervous system and what they do for healing? Literally inside of the makeup of the tears are stress hormones. Literally crying is resetting your nervous system. It's releasing pain at a physiological level. Allah designed. Who made that? Like who designed that? Who designed that system? So when I come and I block it, when I come and I shut it down because I think that's how I'm going to be a good Muslim, I am blocking my own healing and my own emotional health. And I'm also blocking my own physical and spiritual health. I promise you. Because when something gets stuck, it gets toxic. When something gets stuck and undigested, it gets toxic. It's like taking food, but you can't digest it. There was a case, true story, of a little girl. Her body started to break down and she could no longer digest food. True story. And the fact that she could not digest her food, that was the only thing wrong with her. She was dying. Because what was happening is it was poison inside her. Food was becoming poison because she didn't know how. Her body no longer could break it down. Her body couldn't process and digest it. So it was actually poisonous for her. It was poison inside her. And she was going to die. This is what happens when we cannot process, or we do not, or we don't have the tools, or we feel too much shame to process and digest the emotions. They become poison inside us. Does that make sense? So many of us are walking around with so much undigested grief, pain, sadness, anger, and it's just become toxic. It's become toxic. We have to get back in and digest it.